I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about the gut-brain connection. So a lot of people that we work with are struggling with mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, panic attacks, ADHD, and they may have been given this diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, and then going down a conventional route, which typically is medicine, medication, as well as therapy. Whereas looking at a functional approach, we're looking at the root cause of this. And even though obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, we're talking about fertility, and if you're struggling with infertility, and again, you may have then been given your fertility diagnosis and being stuck on that. So in the functional approach, we look at the whole body, looking at the health of your gut, which is key, looking at gut infections, looking at food sensitivities, environmental toxins, looking at thyroid issues, adrenal dysfunction, looking at blood sugar imbalance. All of these matter, and also looking at the lifestyle, the stress component of this. So as you look at the root cause, then you can start to heal the mental health issues as well as getting at the root cause of your infertility. So this is a super powerful episode looking at this whole mental health and infertility completely differently. So sit down, grab your partner, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Feel free to leave a review on iTunes. Hey there, I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call is for action takers, and really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, FabFertile.com, and click on book a free call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's FabFertile, FabFertile.com, and click on book a free call. Today's episode is sponsored by Shop AIP, and they are an online grocery store that specializes in anti-inflammatory products. And I have ordered their snack attack bundle, which has some awesome snacks. A lot of our couples, they travel a lot, and especially making these diet changes and moving to an autoimmune protocol diet, so AIP diet, can be difficult when you're traveling. So having these little snack items available in your purse or in your bag, so you don't go into that like hangry mode or just kind of running around and then you're eating something that's not going to be making you feel very good and going off the restrictions. And also they have a lot of gluten-free options, dairy-free, really whatever your dietary restriction is, you just enter it in and they're going to give you some awesome options for you to try. And yeah, the stuff is really good. So definitely check them out at Shop AIP. And I have got a 10% discount for you. So you just go into when you go to the checkout, just in the coupon section, in the promo section, you just put Get Pregnant Podcast and you get 10% off. So that's shopaip.com.
You are so resilient. Your body it doesn't make mistakes. It's always just trying to do its best for you. But eventually when you add on celiac disease, continuing to eat wheat, the stress of medical school, losing sleep, all that kind of stuff, all of a sudden your cup overflows and your body says, I can't do this anymore.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby.
Hey everyone, I'm Sara Clark, and my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Dr. Sara DeFrancesco, and we're digging into the gut-brain connection, getting stuck on a mental health diagnosis, and why this matters for fertility. Dr. Sara DeFrancesco is a holistic root cause naturopathic doctor, licensed acupuncturist, and the founder of Thriving Force, an investigative medicine clinic that specializes in digestive, immune, and brain health problems. Dr. DeFrancesco helps people turn their brain and health back on by healing root cause metabolic problems like overlooked inflammatory triggers, stealth infections, and nutritional deficiencies, combined with holistic neuroscience so you can heal the cause of what's preventing you from being well. Using the synergy of holistic medicine, functional medicine testing, neuroscience, and mind-body medicine, Dr. DeFrancesco partners with patients to heal digestive problems, fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, depression, brain fog, memory problems, and autoimmune neurological conditions. This approach focuses on investigating and identifying the root cause of your health problems to remove obstacles to healing and correct imbalances, allowing dysfunctional systems to heal. Check out her website at thrivingforce.com. And before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Dr. Sara, excited to have you on the podcast.
Oh, so excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So can you share your journey as to how you came to do this work with us?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll shorten it up and we're going to be touching on, what I experienced and how that really has informed how I work with patients today. But actually, my original intention in getting to the healing field was I wanted to be a counselor or a psychiatrist. And basically, when it came time to learn about pharmaceuticals and how to diagnose a patient in the psychiatric world, that just didn't feel right to me. And I knew that I didn't want to spend my life labeling people and then giving them a treatment that was based on the label, but not on their individual journey and their individual needs. So I knew that was a no for me right away, but I didn't actually know about naturopathic medicine. I didn't know that integrative medicine or functional medicine existed. And this is when I lived in Vermont. I'm a Vermont girl, so that's where the accent people say I have comes from. At the University of Vermont, very excellent medical school there. So they actually had some classes that were teaching medical students about what they called complementary medicine. And so that's how I first learned about Chinese medicine and naturopathic medicine. And I just knew this is what I want to do. I want to be able to help people see that their diagnosis is not something they have to live with. And that when we explore what's going on with their health, their individual body, what is true for them, then we can actually find the causes of things that are called psychiatric diseases, but they're just medical conditions that have effects on the brain. And I think we need to move away from having stigma around depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia and just say that's a medical condition. Let's find out what the cause is of that. And functional medicine, as well as functional neurology, is very successful at doing that. So fast forward to medical school, I went to the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon. And while I was there completing both a naturopathic doctorate and a master's in Chinese medicine, I experienced panic disorder and anxiety. It was terrifying. It was something that I was somewhat familiar with because this actually ran in my family, although we didn't know why until it happened to me. And I went to dozens of naturopathic doctors and acupuncturists, and they helped me, but they never found the cause. So it was always about how can we just calm you down a little bit? How can we relieve the anxiety a little bit? How can we try to be preventive about being triggered into a panic attack? But it was never about why is this happening to you in the first place? And that's the question we all have to ask ourselves. And so for me, and if you're listening to this, you have your own journey. So it might be a lot like mine, or it might be completely different. So I just want to make that clear that this is an individualized process, and there are some things that are very common and they often go overlooked. But it really is about when did these symptoms first start happening? What's going on with your genetics? What's going on with your lifestyle? What's going on with any triggers or infections or inflammatory factors that you've run into along the way? And so for me, it was actually the combination of a traumatic brain injury because I'm a horseback rider. So I always wore a helmet, but I did have some tumbles and I actually got kicked when I was in 8th grade. So I got kicked in the head. Actually quite lucky to be alive because if it had been any higher, I would not be here speaking to you today. And I also had the genetics of celiac disease in my family. And both of those root causes were completely overlooked. So even though I was working with doctors who were very, very well-intentioned, very educated, they were always going like, well, what herbs could calm you down? What homeopathic remedies could calm you down? What nutrients could calm you down? And that's not a bad place to start, but you can't. It's like having like this teeny tiny little fire extinguisher on this raging, smoldering fire that I had within. And I think whether your root causes are similar to mine or completely different, that's what's going on with a lot of people is they're getting, very well-intentioned care. And for some people, fixing the diet and fixing the nutrients, boom, you're done. That's all they need. But for others like myself, there might be something much deeper going on that's overlooked. And so for me, it was a combination of celiac disease and not knowing I had that and continuing to eat wheat and gluten and not knowing that that was a problem for me. And also the combination of this traumatic brain injury, which at the time was not even really diagnosed as a concussion or a problem. Everyone was so worried about the broken jaw that I had. If you've ever broken your jaw, you definitely want to get checked out for traumatic brain injuries, and also know that you might not have symptoms at the time of the accident, but they can manifest later because you have to think of what your body can handle. You're so resilient. I want everyone to really feel that you are so resilient. Your body it doesn't make mistakes. It's always just trying to do its best for you. But eventually when you add on, for example, in my case, traumatic brain injury, celiac disease, continuing to eat wheat, the stress of medical school, losing sleep, all that kind of stuff, all of a sudden your cup overflows and your body says, I can't do this anymore. So I got to the point where I was 15 pounds overweight. I was getting sick and having to call out of clinic because I didn't want to pass on my cold or my virus to my patients. And I had to get real with the way I was living, and I had to get real with my past and what was going on with my root causes. And that really it transformed how I felt and now what I'm able to give to my patients. And it really informed the way I look at someone's case, because I don't just go, hey, you know what? B vitamins and magnesium could be helpful. It's like, what's going on with your root causes? What's your story? Tell me all about it. And that's a really fun place to be. I get to work with some of the most amazing people and just be a partner for them in learning what their cause is and transforming to their next level of health.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I like that sort of analogy of the cup will overflow. And it's sort of sometimes we have this, everything's fine, we're doing everything, and then all of a sudden, boom, the body can no longer handle it. And as you said, it's like that perfect storm where you had the celiac disease coming, the brain injury, and then the stress and medical school and all of that. And then wait a minute, so then sort of pull it all back and then looking for root cause. Yeah. And so today we're going to be digging into sort of the gut brain connection. A lot of people that are listening to this may be like yourself, struggling with panic attacks or anxiety, depression, mental health issues, and sort of labeling them like you were saying, taking maybe a conventional approach to that to heal that, and then also struggling with infertility. So I wanted to talk today about the connection between the two. So first of all, as far as the gut-brain connection, why would someone even think about that when they're struggling with infertility?
Oh, great question. So I like to say that when we treat the gut and we treat the brain, and we work with that gut-brain connection, we're really working with everything in between. So if you have inflammation in the gut, then that's definitely going to throw off your hormones for many different reasons. First of all, nutrient deficiencies. Second of all, inflammation. And then something that people don't think about a lot is if we have a lot of inflammation in our gut, and I always test people to find out if they have infections or if they have digestive issues where they're not producing enough pancreatic enzymes or their liver is having trouble detoxing the colon. So we want to look at that. What I use is a GI map. And so we look at that to see, hey, do you have infections? What is the state of your digestive function? And what few people realize is if you have digestive infections or a high level of digestive inflammation, that can also mess with your hormones through the adrenals. So your ovaries are what I like to call like the divas. If we're talking about singing on the stage, they're responsible for producing most of your sex hormones during your menstruating years, but your adrenals are like the backup singers. And so what happens is the adrenals are also in charge of cortisol, your stress hormone. So if there's high stress, and that could be from an internal cause, meaning inflammation or chronic gut infections, or it could be from an external cause that there's a lot of stress in your life, or that you're not using practices to try to be more resilient to the stress in your life, then the adrenals are going to really focus on pumping out cortisol. And this is when your body gets into this fight or flight mode, and your body is prioritizing staying alive and safe versus being at ease, feeling in abundance, and knowing, hey, this is a great time to have a baby. Because if you are stressed out, your body perceives that there's a threat, and it knows, hey, this is not a good time to have a baby. So it's literally going to shunt the resources for producing hormones and everything that makes you fertile and gives you libido and, makes you able to carry a baby to term. It's going to actually shunt those resources to survival mechanisms. So that's one of the ways if we look at the gut just all by itself. And then whenever we're talking about hormones, we're not just talking about the local area where they're produced in terms of the ovaries and the adrenals. but we're also talking about the feedback of the brain. So also if you're stressed, or if there's nutrient deficiencies, or if there's energy problems. So if you can't get the right nutrients, or there's a high level of environmental toxins in your life, or if there's a lot of stress, this actually prevents your body from fueling your mitochondria, which are basically your little power plants for each one of your cells. And now your brain is not going to be functioning as well. And when that happens, we don't have the correct feedback mechanisms between the hormones and the brain to regulate them properly. And again, put you in a state of your body is going, everything is good. Like, this is a great time to have a baby. And so basically what you want to be thinking about in terms of fertility is getting rid of inflammation, maximizing your nutrient density in your food and in your supplements, and making sure that you're sending your body a signal of safety so that you're in that abundance and fertility mode instead of that like running from the tiger scarcity mode. So that's kind of the big overview there.
Yeah, and we use the GI map as well. And I think people, when they're thinking of fertility, the last place they're thinking of looking at is with gut health, or even considering that they have gut infections. I'd say every last GI map we've run, it comes back with someone either has a parasite, a bacterial infection, fungal infection, something's going on in the gut, and then being able to heal that. And as you say, that's just only part of it. So those environmental toxins, the mental emotional stress. Yeah. And if someone's essentially going to that fight or flight mode, which we see that a lot as well.
Yeah. And when we're thinking about the gut, it's like, this is our soil, right? So a lot of times I think people focus too much on food sensitivities and making food the enemy. Mm-hmm. And yes, in my practice, we certainly do pull out inflammatory foods while we repair the gut. And then we try to add in things as much as we can, because I want people eating more foods, not less foods in the long term, because that's what's best for the microbiome, which is your gut bugs. And we want to have diversity. So you have to have diversity of food to have diversity of those gut bugs. But this is really our soil. So if we're going to plant a seed, and I mean, there's no bigger tree to grow than another human, then we definitely have to get the soil correct, and we have to get it prepared to, host another human being here. So, conventionally it's a leap, but when you think of it that way, it makes a whole lot of sense, because if we don't have that right, we're going to have inflammation, we're going to have nutrient deficiencies, we're going to have hormone imbalance, and we're going to have high stress. So we got to get that right.
Absolutely. And so why is the gut referred to as the second brain? People may have heard this, but if you could just break that down for us.
Yeah. So what's interesting when you look at the nervous system, the enteric nervous system of the gut, is it's actually quite independent. So it's called the second brain, mostly because of that the gut is actually regulating itself for most of its purposes. And it is directly connected to the brain in many ways, which we're learning more about. But the main one is through the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve goes from your brainstem through the front of your neck. So this is why you can activate it with deep breathing or gargling or singing. This is why every meditation or mindfulness practice includes deep breathing, because that literally can send you from a fight or flight mode to a rest and digest mode. And then the vagus nerve goes through all of your organs and down into your gut. So what's interesting about this is 90% of the fibers are actually the gut giving feedback to the brain, and only 10% of the vagus nerve fibers are your brain talking to your gut. So the gut is independent in its nervous system. It governs most of its own functions. And it also is giving a lot of input to the brain. And actually I think maybe sometime in the last 9 months, this paper came out about these specialized cells that are actually in the small intestine called neuropods. And we used to think that the communication from the gut to the brain would take like 10 or 20 minutes because it would have to be hormonally mediated and sent through the vagus nerve and all of this. And then there was this discovery about the neuropods, which we're just learning about. But it seems like the neuropods can actually communicate from gut to brain in milliseconds. So that means that your brain is responding to the gut and what you're eating and what's going on in there. And the reason the gut bugs are important is because they are signaling to each other and talking to each other. So they can actually secrete serotonin and dopamine. They can influence how you're secreting cortisol because of the inflammation, but they do tricky things. So this is one reason why people can have cravings. It might be that you have sugar cravings, but it's more likely it's your gut bugs that are giving you sugar cravings because they want to be fed. And when you go ahead and have, that carb or that sugar and, fulfill that craving, then they do this really mean thing where they now secrete dopamine and they say, oh, thank you very much. And now this is the beginning of like that reward, because dopamine is our reward neurotransmitter. So it's actually, they're getting you hooked on sugar. So there's a lot going on in our second brain that's literally influencing our thoughts and, how we think and our clarity and our emotional stability. So we absolutely have to deal with the gut if we're going to help the brain function optimally.
And this kind of leads into the next question about some common inflammatory brain symptoms. So for me, I had the anger thing going on, like real irritability for years, because I was diagnosed with premature ovarian failure. I had both my kids with donor eggs, and then years later discovered multiple food sensitivities, gut infections, and then doing too much. So and for me, so it was like that anger and irritability, like moodiness. And so, what are some other things that people can kind of have for as far as inflammatory brain symptoms?
Yeah, so great question. So when I think of brain inflammation in general, there's sort of three different categories. So the first category would be the more transient kind of brain inflammation, where it's like brain fog, maybe some anxiety, depression, maybe some just like short-term memory loss, or wandering into a room, you're not sure why you're there. Misplacing items is a big one. When I was really suffering with my brain health, I could tell, like at the end of the semester in medical school, I wouldn't know where any of my stuff was. And I was a very organized person, but all of a sudden I'd be like, I don't know where I left my keys. I don't know where I left my water bottle. I don't know where I left my sweatshirt. So like little things like that. And then that becomes stressful because then you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose everything. And then you're running around looking for stuff. So if you identify with that, you may be in that transient brain category. And the reason why it's transient is because if you improve nutrition, if you improve sleep, if you decrease stress, it will go away. So these symptoms will like wax and wane with stress and wax and wane with self-care issues. So that's a transient category. Now, and anger can definitely be in there too. And as I'm sure you've talked about with your listeners as well, especially if this is like irritability timed with PMS right before a period or during a period, then this is usually actually too much estrogen that's pushing too much serotonin. So we think of serotonin as the happy neurotransmitter, which it is, but everything has to be at the right level. So if you're too flushed with serotonin, then it can actually make you irritable and easy to anger. So it's not just about like, oh, I'm angry all the time. It's like irascibility, and irascibility is specifically that thing wouldn't normally make you angry. Like you're quick to anger, you're quick to fly off the handle, which is super not fun for you or anyone around you, right? So we got to deal with that.
I used to think that was my personality. I'm like, why am I having a meltdown in front of the closet trying to get a shoe out? Like, why does that and now I'm like, okay, obviously there's still things that tick me off, but in general, I'm like, oh, I can kind of flow through things a little better.
So I'm glad you said that, because here's the thing is like, we all think that, right? Like we all think that about our health in general, where it's like, oh, like I have bloating, but that's what eating is, right? That's normal, right? And then you help somebody with their gut and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that bloating and all that gurgling wasn't normal. And now I feel so much better and so much energy after having a meal. And then it's even worse with the brain, because it's how we think of ourselves. We're like, why am I such an emotional mess? Like no one wants to be that way, and it's really painful. So I hope anyone who's listening, it's like, this is the one thing I want you to take away, is that if you're dealing with memory issues or brain fog or emotional instability, there's no shame in that. And there's really nothing wrong with you. There is something going on medically, and we can find that thing and you can heal it. So I want everyone to know that, because there's such a stigma around that. And, our brain is really the record of all the experiences we've ever had. So when we experience that this is where we lose control, or this is when we get angry, or this is when we cry over and over again, we just begin to think, well, that's who I am. But it really doesn't have to be that way. So I want to make that really clear, is that these things can be improved. So getting back to the brain inflammation, so the transient brain inflammation is one thing. Another category would be if people have had PTSD, if they've had traumatic brain injuries, if they've had a stroke, or any sort of very severe stress. And this can actually activate the glial cells in the brain. So the glial cells are actually your immune cells. And for most of neurology's history, we've been obsessed with the neurons, which is what carries the electrical impulses. And the glial cells are actually named that because they're named after glue. It's like we used to think they were just the glue that keeps the brain together. But these cells have everything to do with how well the neurons are functioning and the electrical impulses are firing. So for example, somebody who has brain fog and it's transient and it's actually a nutrient deficiency, which is causing a problem with providing energy to the brain, then that's what brain fog is for the most part. It's your neurons are firing too slow. And so it's not keeping up with your life in real time. But somebody who has glial cell activation, that's a more serious form of inflammation. Once the glial cells are activated by a traumatic event, like a traumatic brain injury, then they go into a state of inflammation. And we have to be very, very diligent to get them out of a state of inflammation. And we can still do that through things like anti-inflammatories like CBD, turmeric, resveratrol are three that are very high in the research. And if you want to learn all about that, I highly recommend checking out Dr. Datis Karazian, who has taught me about that. We have to be very, very diligent with lifestyle. Sometimes people need to go on a ketogenic diet. Exercise is very important. Sleep is imperative. Now, the difference between someone who has a transient state of brain inflammation versus somebody who has glial cell activation is like how little it takes to throw them off. So the person who has a glass of wine and feels like they're hungover the next day, that might be more glial cell activation. So one of the telltale signs is like just the littlest insults that they should be resilient to would throw them off completely and they'd feel terrible. So if you've ever been hungover, that's how someone with glial cell activation feels every day. And sometimes these people have very chronic infections like Lyme disease or mold or things like that. So the very chronic infections can cause that as well. And then the third thing would be if there's actually autoimmunity that is making it through the blood-brain barrier and attacking the brain. So those are sort of the three levels: the transient, the glial cell activation, and then the autoimmune issue.
So any kind of autoimmune issue.
Well, not any kind of autoimmune. So like someone who has Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is a thyroid issue, doesn't necessarily have brain autoimmunity. So there are specialized tests that we can look to see if there's an autoimmune process that is affecting parts of the brain. So that would be a more rare case than the other two that we talked about, and something completely different than having celiac disease like I have, or having a different autoimmune condition in other parts of the body, because the blood-brain barrier does protect us. So it's really only if we have autoimmunity to tissues in the brain, or if the blood-brain barrier has been broken down and breached, which can happen with events like TBIs and strokes and severe PTSD. So that's something that would be evaluated in those specific circumstances. So definitely we've like gone on to something completely different than, somebody who's looking for help with fertility, but it's good for everybody to know.
So let's dig into some of the root causes of mental health issues, so anxiety, depression, ADHD. If we can start with digestion.
Yeah. So I mean, well, let's put it this way. If we think about digestion, we all have heard, oh, you are what you eat, right? So we know that if we're eating all the right foods, we should be getting that nutrition, but that's unfortunately not always the case. You are what you eat, what you're able to digest, and then what you absorb and use. So if we don't deal with the gut issues, then we can't have a meaningful effect on inflammation. We can't have a meaningful effect on nutrition. and we can't have a meaningful effect on stress. So that's why the gut is where it's at for really, putting a blanket of health on all the other systems, because when the gut is working well, the hormones work well. When the gut is working well, the immune system works well. And when the gut is working well, you're going to actually be able to digest and use all the organic kale and fancy meals that you're buying and cooking. So that's why we always want to start there.
Yeah, this is something that I struggled with for years. I had that bloating. I thought a lot of these things can be common, but not normal. So the bloating, the gas, the constipation, and diarrhea, or that diagnosis of IBS. And so to dig into that further.
Yeah, absolutely. And then specifically with anxiety, there's some very common nutrient deficiencies. A very common one is an iron deficiency. And anyone who has an iron deficiency is not going to have an optimally functioning brain. So we have to consider that with brain fog and depression as well, because iron is literally what's helping your brain get the oxygen it needs to function. And so this is definitely something, to be considered. Unfortunately, I see all the time people will have their reports from their OB, and it's like, wow, your ferritin is really low, and you need and that's your storage form of iron. So you need iron to carry a baby to term, and you also need iron to for your brain to work properly. And a lot of times, specifically with women, the reason that their iron is low is because they have a hormone imbalance that is causing them to have a heavy menses. And then it's like the more you bleed, the more iron you lose. Mm-hmm. And the more iron you lose, the more you bleed. So that iron deficiency has to be corrected. And then the underlying imbalance of the hormones that is causing the heavy menses has to be corrected. And that's usually a problem with too much estrogen relative to progesterone.
And what about, let's digging into microbiome imbalance or an infection, like we talked a little bit. So you use the GI map, but what would you say there as far as looking at a root cause?
Yeah, so that's I just am such a bacteria geek. And I think we all kind of have to be. It's like, we're either going to make friends with them in this life or they're going to win. So we want to be friends with the bacteria. And I think that, first of all, it's really important when I talk about that we're eradicating pathogens. So they're bacteria that should not be there. Or sometimes they're actually bacteria that should be there, but they're overgrown and we got to knock them back and get them into balance. I'm not talking about using antibiotics. So we do want to avoid antibiotics at all costs unless it's an emergency. Sometimes people, I think, when they look at the fact that I'm a naturopathic doctor, they think, oh, you must not be into these other conventional therapies. Yes, I am, in the right cases. So when I'm talking about getting rid of these infections, we work with antimicrobial herbs that aren't going to wipe out the flora. They're going to they work in an entourage effect. So the herbs, they both are antimicrobial to get rid of bacteria that aren't wanted, but they also work on the immune system and help the immune system stand up to that pathogen and help it balance itself out. So that's very different from the way antibiotics would work. Now, of course, if there's an emergency, we want to use the antibiotics because we're not messing around and we have to save a life there. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about chronic infections, these are things that are not deadly. These are things that people pick up from restaurant food, from traveling, from poor sanitation, either in their own homes or, unfortunately, restaurants. I mean, when I was in naturopathic medical school, I was taught the gut is everything and you always have to heal the gut, but nobody has gut infections. And the only time that you should suspect a gut infection would be if someone went out of the country and got really bad traveler's diarrhea. And so I was always taught, oh, well, it would be really obvious, but otherwise don't consider that. Now, that doesn't make any sense anymore. Maybe that made sense 20, 50 years ago. But now we get food from all over the world, and the average American only eats 3 meals in their own home. So we have a lot of, opportunity to get to be infected, and also people in general in our society probably not people listening to this podcast because they've probably been implementing lots of good stuff. But people in general have lower immunity, so they are not able to fight off and get rid of the pathogens. And they also have low stomach acid because of the stress and because they're eating on the run and they're in their sympathetic nervous system all riled up with their cortisol high. And when that happens, all of your resources, literally your blood, gets shunted away from your digestive organs, and you're ready to run out of there instead of actually have the digestive amylase and all of that start in your mouth, and the right hydrochloric acid in your stomach, and the pancreatic enzymes, and like people aren't digesting, and we have to eat every day. So sometimes I do feel like a broken record because I'm like gut infections. But the truth is it's the most common infection you can have. Yes, people definitely have other things like Epstein-Barr or Lyme disease or mold or other viruses, but if I was a betting person, I'm going to put my money on the gut bugs every time because that's the most likely thing for you to pick up. Coincidentally, and luckily, it's also the easiest thing for us to get rid of. So it's really not that difficult when we say, oh, well, you have these 3 bacteria and your immune system is functioning low. So we're going to go ahead and boost your immune system. We're going to work on that. And then we're going to go ahead and get rid of those gut bugs with the antimicrobial herbs. And then we're going to help heal up the gut, and we're going to use food as medicine, and it's all good. If any of you listening have a pet, then you know that when you take the pet into the vet for their annual visit, the first thing they ask for is a stool test. And, I don't know why that's not the same with humans. I think like if it's good enough for the dog, it's good enough for you. And our technology is much better that we have for humans.
Absolutely. Yeah. Test, don't guess, and dig into this and use that targeted approach to allow it to heal and not just like throwing all these things at it and guessing.
I mean, I think it's like the one test I couldn't live without. So like, I can't, your symptoms aren't going to tell me whether you have this bacteria or that bacteria. There's other tests where it's like, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on with the hormones by listening to someone and what their symptoms are and what their story is. And I am a big believer in test, don't guess. So you want to verify that, but the gut infections is a different level because it's like, you just can't know unless you look. It's a microscopic level.
What about a blood sugar imbalance for a mental health issue?
Yeah, blood sugar is a huge one. So this is, I don't know, I think I would probably say this is the most common issue with anxiety, but that's also because the blood sugar issue itself is so multifactorial. So blood sugar issues, of course, can stem from eating too many carbs. It can also stem from not eating enough healthy protein and fat, or just not eating enough during the day, or just having like a sporadic eating schedule. So, if you are in between meals and you're feeling spacey or indecisive or even irritable and hangry, then that is a blood sugar issue. And so a lot of times we can handle that with diet alone, but sometimes it goes a lot deeper than that. So another big issue is the gut infections because they are going to cause a higher level of cortisol, and cortisol also messes with your blood sugar. So when your blood sugar is high, insulin is secreted to pull the blood sugar out of the blood and store it in the fat cells or use it for energy. Now, if you have a blood sugar spike and insulin does that, you can sometimes, depending on what's going on with your individual case, you can sometimes have a blood sugar low. Now, when that blood sugar is so low, guess who comes out to play? Cortisol, because cortisol is like, oh my God, we don't have enough energy to run the system. Like, we got to get the lights back on. Otherwise, we're going to die. So cortisol then spikes the blood sugar again. So we have the interplay between our dietary sugar, blood sugar spikes based on, too many refined carbohydrates, too much sugar, etc. And then this can also lead to higher stress just by nature of triggering the cortisol. Now, the other thing is a lot of people are actually stressing themselves into blood sugar issues. So people will say, like, I'm really not eating any sugar, or it's very low in my diet, but why do I still have these symptoms of blood sugar imbalance? And that's actually because of the stress in their life, and because the cortisol, every time they get stressed, is spiking that blood sugar. Cortisol is there to save the day. It's famous for, the mom who is like able to lift the car and save the children in the crisis. That's what cortisol is there for. It's like, I got you. I'm going to give you the energy to power through this. But unfortunately, we're really like living in this society that has us stressed out all the time over nothing. It's like your body doesn't actually know the difference between a crisis or an annoying boss who won't stop texting you about that thing you're supposed to do.
Yeah. And also sleep dysregulation. People are not sleeping well, then that's affecting the blood sugar as well the entire next day.
Absolutely. So that's where you can get into this really vicious cycle, because the worse your sleep is, the more you crave carbs and sugar the next day. So it is already like your blood sugar is already off, which is why you have the craving. And then because your blood sugar is off and you might give into those cravings, then your sleep is going to be worse. So that is like a self-perpetuating cycle that a lot of people live in with sugar, coffee, sleep aids. And it's like, we gotta break the wheel there and break that cycle.
And another root cause is thyroid problems. So we see this a lot with people dealing with infertility, be it hypothyroidism, not diagnosed, or maybe not even, diagnosed incorrectly. And then also Hashimoto's. We just had Dr. Rob Abbott on the podcast talking about the medical study he did with the efficacy of the AIP diet and helping that with people that have Hashimoto's. And one of the 17 participants, one of the ladies actually got pregnant. So making these changes is awesome. And it's not just diet, it's lifestyle as well. So what are you seeing with the thyroid problems and mental health?
Yeah. So I love that those studies are getting done. I love it. I don't know if you guys have noticed this yet, but there's this crazy thing going on where there's a skeptic trend where people are doing #food is not medicine or something like that. And it's like, okay, have you ever taken basic biochemistry? Do you know about these cofactors that are involved in every metabolic process? They're called nutrients. They're just vitamins and minerals. I don't know what planet you live on. But I digress.
It's so funny with with functional medicine, we need to, or even like natural solutions, quote unquote, we become researchers and we dig into all this stuff. But with conventional medicine, when we're given a pill, we're like, okay.
Yeah. And many of those pills don't have a mechanism of action that's actually explainable, which is hilarious. So yeah, I mean, look, again, it's like, I respect that there is a time and a place for everything, and that I believe everyone should have autonomy over their body. So if someone is choosing to use a drug, that's their choice. And I have nothing to say about it. Good for you. If that's working for you, I just send you love. But I will not stand for people attacking other people's choices and erroneously trying to debunk things. Just because you didn't actually do a PubMed search and look something up and actually do the research doesn't give anyone the right to, go on other people's threads and try to say it's not scientifically backed. I mean, I find that hilarious. Anyway, so you asked about thyroid. So I love that research is getting done, because this food is medicine. I mean, it really is. With the thyroid, with autoimmunity, any autoimmune condition I think of as a process unto itself. And that may manifest in the thyroid as Hashimoto's or as Graves' disease. It can manifest in the nervous system, for example, with MS and other neurological autoimmunity issues. And so we have to take care of the tissue itself that's being attacked and protect it, and give it the nutrients that it needs to recover and all of that. But we also have to ask, well, why did this happen in the first place? The diets are bringing that inflammation down, and they're finding that there's, these specific triggers for some people with autoimmunity. And then also, I think I would just layer onto that we have to go, well, why would this person have autoimmunity, but their neighbor doesn't? And sometimes that is a genetic predisposition plus a stressor plus a trigger. And so a stressor would be like lifestyle, sleep, nutrient deficiencies, things like that. A trigger would be like the root causes that are underlying that need to be dealt with so that the autoimmune process can stop escalating and can go into basically a remission state. And so those triggers are, likely infections, toxins. And there again, it's like in addition to doing the work with the nutrition, it's like we have to heal the soil. So it's great if you have the right fertilizer for your soil, but what's going on with the soil itself?
Absolutely. And another root cause, nutrient deficiencies, which you've mentioned a few times. So looking at folate or B12, and a lot of people are taking a prenatal with folic acid to make sure it's methylated folate. We had Dr. Ben Lynch on the podcast talking about the importance of that. So really go back and listen to that episode. It's super awesome. But we regularly see people with low B12. So if you can talk about nutrient deficiencies as a root cause of a mental health issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to look at all of those things, especially like where I live, we have to look at vitamin D as well, which has a huge impact on the immune system and therefore the brain as well. There's two parts to the nutrient deficiency issue. It's like, well, there's actually a few parts. So we have to think about it this way. It's like, are you not getting enough? Like you're not getting enough in your diet or your supplements, whatever it is that you're using to get the nutrients. Are you using them up too fast because of stress? So B vitamins and magnesium are two things that I always consider, and they're both water soluble. So you're not going to overload people unless you do really, really massive, crazy doses. They're just going to wash out. And that's why if you take B vitamins, you'll see that your pee turns bright yellow or bright orange. And that's just the B vitamins you didn't need being excreted. And then magnesium, if you take too much of a certain type of magnesium, then your stool is going to be a bit looser. So those are two things that we have to consider. But at the end of the day, in terms of brain health, it's all about, does the brain have enough energy to do what it's supposed to do? And that's where we get into like the basic things like B vitamins and magnesium and, all of that. But then we also have to consider what's going on with the neurotransmitters themselves. So once we remove the inflammation, and we're getting a healthy lifestyle in there, we're getting sleep. Exercise is a huge one because BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor, is basically like the fertilizer for the brain. And actually, we can increase BDNF just through exercise. We don't even have to take a supplement for that. But then there are supplements, like one of my favorites is lion's mane, which is shown to improve BDNF. So we have to, in the same way that we want to take care of the garden that is our gut, we have to also take care of the garden that is our brain. So the first step in that is making sure the gut soil is right. And then I just think of it like this. It's like, well, if we take care of the gut and people are feeling great, then awesome. Like we're where we want to be. Now, if there's something else left over, I'll actually have people do a neurotransmitter questionnaire to see if anything specifically pops up or if any of their symptoms specifically pop up in terms of the neurotransmitters. And then we have to help balance those things with specific nutrients and specific herbs. Like, for example, if somebody's having a really hard time with motivation, they're starting lots of projects and they're not getting them done, they're having trouble concentrating, that sounds like dopamine to me. And so we might use things like mucuna, which is an herb that can help boost dopamine. Other focus issues can be more about acetylcholine, and we might need to help to push that neurotransmitter. So, and then if we're going to get really, really deep into it, you did mention MTHFR. People can have predispositions in how their hormones work and how their neurotransmitters work that we can actually see on a genetic test. Mm-hmm. And these genetic tests are really fascinating. This space in healthcare is evolving very quickly. So we used to only have tests that would look at the SNPs, which is what 23 looks at. Right. 23andMe looks at. That's just one form of a genetic mutation. And now we have other tests that will look at not just the SNPs, but complete deletions and also indoles, which are two other types of genetic mutations that we have. So, we got to start with the basics. And if the basics do really well, then maybe we don't need to go any further. But we can get very high level with how specific we get with the nutrients and how specific we get with the neurotransmitters and even into the genetics of the brain.
Yeah, and a great book for that is Dr. Ben Lynch's book, Dirty Genes. This gives a good overview of I think he's got the 7 top genes he talks about. And a lot of it is this diet and lifestyle strategies that we're discussing today to make changes, massive changes. So sometimes you can go down that genetic, that rabbit hole, and next thing you know, you're gone.
Yeah, I don't like to go there until we've taken care of everything else. But then as things get, it just depends. So it depends on, it's like, if this thing should have changed and there's a genetic mutation that might do that, then we should probably figure that out. But at the end of the day, it's just going to be about, how do we deal with that genetic mutation if we have it? It's about tweaking the nutrition and tweaking the diet to make up for that tendency.
And are you helping people go out? No. What about the approach with if someone's on any kind of medication? What's your role in that?
Yeah. So if someone comes to me on medication, which happens often, and I'll go with just the example of an antidepressant, first of all, again, it's like, I have no judgment. It's your body. It's what works for you. So, I'm not against medication. But people come to me because that's not getting them where they want to be. So I want to make that really clear. And, basically it's like, we have to do all the things that we've talked about, and the medication is the last thing to be dealt with, because we're not going to, it's not a good idea. First of all, don't discontinue medication without talking to your doctor. We have to say that. Mm-hmm. Do not just stop taking your antidepressant. That's a really bad idea. It will not go well. And, we have to make sure that people have a new level of health and a new level of their mood is good and they're feeling really good and stable. And then we can actually make a plan for helping them wean off of that, antidepressant in our example here. And depending on what that is and how long they've been on it, sometimes we can do that in, like 2 to 3 months. Sometimes it takes a lot longer. So, if people have been on things like Effexor, which, that one is well known to cause a lot of side effects when, people are trying to wean off of it, and it makes people feel, the way that people describe it is like a whooshy head, like kind of like you drank too much cough syrup. But it can also cause like the feeling of like electric shocks throughout the body. So it's like, this is nothing to mess around with. And so you want to be doing that with somebody who's experienced in doing that. Now, the tough part is that these drugs, once they're given in terms of conventional medicine, are, assuming that that the patient is going to be taking it for the rest of their lives. So there's actually not published protocols on how to get off of them. So when I do it, it's like, I just make sure that they're in a really good place, that they've been in a really good place for months at least. And then we have to play with how to safely get them off of that drug very slowly. And so we'll actually use a compounding pharmacy so that we can do it even slower than, the standard pills that are made. And we do it slowly over time, and we take care of their neurotransmitters while we do that. And we make sure that we have frequent check-ins with them to make sure that they're doing well. And we just listen to the patient and make sure that, they're doing it in a way that's comfortable for them. And we don't try to push it too hard. So Effexor is, I think, probably the worst one. And a lot of doctors actually don't even prescribe it anymore because we now know that there's such side effects. But if people have been on it for a long time, this is something that was really popular like about 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, so working with a qualified practitioner is key. Yeah, and as far as anything you're obsessed with right now, be it a book, an app, a documentary, a website, anything you are loving?
Oh yeah, I am totally obsessed with Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditations. And I think that a piece that we're really missing in functional medicine, which I, try very hard to bring into my practice, is people are going, hey, it's all about the supplements and you got to, do this nutrition plan, you got to take these supplements and you got to get at all these root causes, but nobody is addressing like what is going on in someone's mind and what are the thoughts that they have about themselves and their health and what are the thoughts that they have about what they're capable of. And when you're on a healing journey, I mean, a lot of people will tell me, they'll say, I just feel like I'm broken. And I say, you're not broken. You just, you got some stuff that's medically going on. So it's like, we just have to separate, like, this is medically what's going on with my body, but I am not that disease. I am not defined by my health challenges, right? And so something that we do in the office is at every single visit, I ask people, what's new and good? Tell me 3 things you're grateful for and tell me why. And the people who get better are the people who, no problem, even if they're right at the beginning of their treatment and they're still in a lot of pain, they still have a lot of symptoms, they can still come up with 3 things. It doesn't have to be huge, I tell them. It's just you have to recognize your wins every day. And, the folks who I've struggled to help are the folks who I'll say, what's new and good? And I'll tell them, we're going to do this every time. Every time I'm going to ask you. And they just slouch in their chair and say, oh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Yeah.
And I say, well, look, we talked a lot about cortisol today in this podcast. So what's happening when we have negative thoughts about our environment, about ourselves, when we're judging others, when we're in that mode, is that we are firing off cortisol. We are raising our stress levels. We are keeping our hormones from working optimally. We are causing damage to our cells. And if we are, the thing about humans is we get into a pattern, just like you were saying, like you thought the bloating was normal. And I thought things like that about myself as well. I thought that was normal until it healed. And I went, wow, this new normal is really awesome. Yeah. We have to break that pattern. And I'm totally obsessed. You guys should definitely check Dr. Joe Dispenza out. He has many awesome books. I really love Becoming Supernatural, and I really love his Blessing of the Energy Centers meditation. That's a guided meditation. You can find it, on his website or iTunes or something like that. And we really have to not just deal with all the nutrients of the body and all the medical problems that we are trying to solve of the body, but we really have to see that human in front of us as the spirit that is here with a purpose, and as someone whose light has been dimmed because of what they're going through. But I really believe, as much as it sucks, because I've been there. So when I say this, understand, I don't think that it's all rainbows and unicorns, because I've been there with panic attacks and thinking I'd never be a doctor, and, having really negative self-talk about myself and being scared all the time when I had anxiety. I've been there. But it was the greatest gift I could have ever gotten, because it made me face myself. It made me have to make myself better. And from there, trying to work on myself and trying to work on my body and my mind actually got really fun. So if you're dealing with a health challenge, that is you too. You're on a healing journey, and that is a hero's journey. And I think we really need to address this piece. And I think we really just need to learn to have love for ourselves and for each other. And I'm very excited about functional medicine and holistic medicine because it attracts so many women. And I think that this is a place where we can be really supportive of each other and have a lot of community. And, that's truly what I think it's all about. I think that this work really transcends the medicine itself. And it is a mindset and almost a spiritual journey if you choose to see it that way.
Yeah, very empowering. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, can you spell the last name on that?
Oh my gosh,
is it Dispenza?
That's right.
Okay. And is there a success story you'd like to share with us?
Oh my gosh.
Lots.
Yeah. I guess what I'd like to share is a lot of this stuff. So if you're just landing on this podcast, you might just be getting started on your health journey and your nutrition and lifestyle, or maybe you've been doing it all and you are still looking for help to improve some of your challenges. I guess what I would say is a lot of this really does come down to managing your stress and your nutrition and your lifestyle. And so for some people, I just followed up with a patient yesterday who I think we've been working together for 3 or 4 months. And she came in with terrible abdominal pain and terrible PMS and flaky skin and all kinds of hormonal imbalances. And within the first 30 days, because we cleaned up her nutrition and we got her the nutrients she needed, and we took out caffeine and we took out alcohol, that really brought her down from her anxiety being a 10 to a 2. And then we found, she had gut infections. She actually had one of the craziest cases of H. pylori I had ever seen, which is a bacteria that can be a pathogen in the stomach. Yeah. And when we started to heal that, it's things just kicked into hyper gear. So she's she's just rocking it. It's her life went from, oh my God, I'm really worried about like being able to have kids in the future and I'm worried about my health and something's really wrong, to like her just rocking life and feeling great. And that's 4 months. So, not to promise that everybody's case is like that, because a lot of people, it depends on how long it's been going on and it depends on what the root causes are for you. But this stuff can change really quickly. It can actually change much faster than you think when we're working with the body instead of against it. And all you need is to be patient with yourself and to be doing the work in terms of your lifestyle and nutrition and stress management. And, if it's something that you need to partner with someone, then just find a doctor or practitioner who's going to listen and who's going to be on your side no matter what. It's amazing work to do. I'm really blessed to do it.
Thanks for sharing that with us. And it is amazing. You have someone that's at a 10 and they can barely, with anxiety at a 10 and moving it down to a 2 is no small feat within 4 months.
Yeah. Well, actually that was like 30 days because really for her, it was like, there was a lot of lifestyle going on. I mean, so I like that story because of how empowering it was. And so her lifestyle really brought it from like a 10 to a 2. And then like this other stuff that was underlying it was like, now she's like really rocking it. Mm-hmm. She's like, I don't have anxiety. I'm chasing my dream. She's making some big moves in her life. That's what it's all about. And she's I bring her up because she's looking forward to starting a family. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And now you're offering a 3-step strategy to heal digestive, mood, and memory problems. And they can get that at thrivingforce.com/gut-brain-guide. And I'll have the link in the show notes. But what can they expect in that?
Yeah. So this is the guide I wish someone handed me when I was having panic attacks and anxiety. And actually just this past weekend, I had a beautiful email from someone who's on my email list. And she said, I followed what you shared in there and I changed my diet and I haven't had anxiety or panic attacks. And, I'm all about, if I can share a tip with you and if I can share something that you can do right now at home and that changes your life, then wow, like that's amazing. Because again, your story might be like mine or it might be different. For me, it was taking out the gluten that was the major thing. So in that guide, I share about eating for health of your brain. I share about why gluten specifically is a problem for the brain. And I share about things that you can do right now when you're feeling anxious and really how to start that journey back to wellness. Because also one of the reasons that I love working with people who have anxiety is because it's like a lot of energy that's just unproductive, and you have a lot of energy and a lot of emotional intelligence, and we just have to figure out how to help you harness that. And I think that that's such a fun thing to do.
I love it. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your words of wisdom on this topic. Having people look at it in a completely different way. And especially everyone's listening to this that's struggling with infertility. And if you have anxiety or other mental health issues, looking at the health of your gut is key, and also the other lifestyle factors as well. And so, thanks for coming on, Dr. Sara.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Today's episode is sponsored by Shop AIP, and they are an online grocery store that specializes in anti-inflammatory products. And I have ordered their Snack Attack bundle, which has some awesome snacks. A lot of our couples, they travel a lot, and especially making these diet changes and moving to an autoimmune protocol diet, so AIP diet, can be difficult when you're traveling. So having these little snack items available in your purse or in your bag, so you don't go into that like hangry mode or just kind of running around and then you're eating something that's not going to be making you feel very good and going off the restrictions. And also they have a lot of gluten-free options, dairy-free, really whatever your dietary restriction is, you just enter it in and they're going to give you some awesome options for you to try. And the stuff is really good. So definitely check them out at Shop AIP. And I have got a 10% discount for you. So you just go into when you go to the checkout, just in the coupon section, in the promo section, you just put Get Pregnant Podcast and you get 10% off. So that's shopaip.com. Hey there, I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call is for action takers, really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, FABfertile.com and click on Book a Free call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's FabFertile, FABfertile.com, and click on book a free call. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.